The next panel holds the key to the success in China in the future. How can the Chinese startup economy drive the Chinese economy forward in the future? That's the question to answer. Now let's put our hands together to welcome to the stage Dr. Lu Gang, the founder and CEO of TechNode, and he will introduce our panelists. Good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Let's cut to the chase. I believe that you are no stranger to the four panelists, but still, I wish that the four panelists can spend some time introducing themselves. We have two beautiful ladies and two handsome guys on the stage, so now let's start from the lady sitting near to me. Good afternoon. It is an honor to be invited here to speak on this topic. I'm Annie Tao, and I am the co-founder and VP Operations of Horizon Robotics. Horizon is dedicated to developing AI chips and solutions based on the AI chips. Our vision and mission is to build AI computing platforms. So far, we are in three key areas: smart city, smart retail, and smart driving. Last December, we introduced the first AI visual chips. We had the chips for the automobiles, chip journey, and another set of chip for smart retail, so Sunrise. And I am in charge of operations and financing. Hi, I'm Wang Jialiang Michael from TouchPow. TouchPow has its business mainly in overseas countries. We have over 100 million DAU, daily active users in overseas countries. We have a TouchPow typing methods that support more than 100 languages covering 200 regions. Most of the Android phones are TouchPow customers. We are also involved in the AI business. We launched an AI assistant that is based on big data and natural language processing. We also have a AI research team at Mountain View in America. While Horizon is focused on the AI development in China, we, on the other hand, has our focus at the world. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jenny Wu. I am the founder and managing partner of Baidu Capital. It is a JV with China Life together with Baidu. It is an independent PE. We've been up and running for a year and a half. We are focusing on internet and high tech. In the past year, we've invested in 7 companies, totaling 3 billion RMB in our investment value. Our goal for the first phase is 20 billion. So in the past one and a half years, we've invested 3 billion in projects that you're very familiar with: Waymarker, Manbang, Grab Taxi in Southeast Asia, Himalayas, Yima Yangguang, and a chip manufacturer in America. We've done pretty well in the first phase with a very good scorecard. And in the future, we'll continue to delve into the internet and big data. We are investing in the latter stage of a company's development. I am Zhang Yang from Volcanics Venture. Volcanics Venture started operating in the second half of 2016. Now we have an RMB fund together with a US dollar fund. We've already invested in 36 companies in total, and they are in two areas. The first area is advanced medical care. It is mainly about genomics, DNA testing, and treatment. And the other 50% is about AI and data enabled business innovation or business model innovation in different fields. Now, everything in the future will be based on artificial intelligence and data for all the application services to realize, say, Internet of Things and robotics all fall into this category. These are the two areas of our investment. Thank you. Okay, now let's get down to the main theme today. That's China's powerful startup economy. My first question to the four panelists is perhaps you can talk about your own views briefly about the Chinese startup economy and whether it is powerful or not. People say that entrepreneurship is a bit of a bubble in China where everybody is starting up their own businesses, more or less. You've been very successful in this field. So what is your perspective on whether the current Chinese startup economy is powerful or has some bubble in it? I'll start first. Horizon is one of the tremendous amount of startups in China. We started around 2 years ago, and I want to approach this matter from several perspectives. Seldom is there any country in the world that can double its GDP in a short period of time. UK used 150 years to double the GDP. America spent 50 years to double its GDP, but China, within the past 30 years, to grow the GDP volume by 25 times. I think it's unquestionably true that Chinese startup economy is powerful. But Mr. Wu said that perhaps there could be some overheating in the startup economy. There could be some bubbles in it. If we look at the theory of economics, you would find that it's about the potential growth power is lower or weaker than the existing growth power, or that's to say that there is a shortage of real demand and there are speculated demands or hyped demands that are in the support of the current growth of whatever business it is. But if we look at AI, robotics, pan-internet, as Baidu capital invests in, and the two areas that Mr. Zhang Yang talks about, whatever they are talking about, I think that the momentum is very strong. 10 years ago, if we wind back to 10 years ago, only 30% of the Chinese GDP was driven by internal demand, domestic demand. But now, according to the latest statistics, it is 60%. And now, domestic demand has become a really powerful driver and driving force behind China's economic growth. So the demand is there, and that's for sure, that's tangible, though it is a mixing picture in different industries or different sectors. That's a local feature, but the global feature is that the Chinese startup economy is really powerful and it is sustainable. With the lady first principle, Jenny, maybe you could start as the second speaker. Well, I was talking with my fellow panelists how to understand powerful, the word powerful. Then I think that I have two levels of understandings towards this word. First, powerful denotes what it has already generated and what it is about to bring to the world or bring to the startup economy. I think that the Chinese startup economy is already very powerful, but it will be even more powerful. Yesterday, people said that BAT are now regarded as conventional companies. Could you imagine that people talking about Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent as conventional companies? It was simply unimaginable 10 years ago or 5 years ago because they brought tremendous changes to the Chinese domestic economy, and that's without a shadow of doubt. But today, even they themselves are thinking that they are conventional companies. Then who are the unorthodox companies? I believe that they belong to those that use new technologies, new scenarios, and new cases of use. They are the new forces, and they uphold the startup spirits. They stick to the entrepreneurship spirit that you can find in BAT years ago. Against this high-tech backdrop at the current times, I am looking forward to seeing more similar companies, and their influence and implications will be even more powerful than we are seeing today. So from PC internet to mobile internet, we've come a long way, but these days we're talking about AI, blockchain, AR, VR. They represent even newer technologies that can reshape our lives and works in a deeper way. So it's powerful now, but it will even be more powerful in the future.
Ladies are very optimistic about the startup economy in China. They thought that the Chinese market is good, but I would like to beg for difference. Honestly, from the perspective of capital, I think it is overheated. Why? For example, I when I started my business 10 years ago, there is no angel investment, there was no VC or other capitals. And I still remember that I went to SoftBank China, then seeking for investment, and the counterpart investor asked, "How much do you need?" And my partner and I looked at each other and said, maybe 1 million. And the investor asked 1 million RMB or US dollar, and we said 1 million RMB. But the conference was over then, and in the end, with our own business development, we continue to grow our company and the business. But now, perhaps a person will come to you with a BP and ask for ask for 1 million US dollar investment. So we can see now maybe not very good project can also get financing now. So in this perspective, I think it is overheated. However, perhaps this is an essential phase for this era. Maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I went to the Silicon Valley. I went to the Bay Area. I also saw the same phenomena. Everybody was talking about how to create our own business. So back then, if you were in the Silicon Valley, if you don't have your own business card, you didn't even have the courage to perhaps talk to other people. So in a macro view, for this era, if we want to seek for qualitative changes rather than quantitative changes, we need some overheating. Maybe there are some irreliable projects, but some projects will be able to survive the difficulties because of the support of capital, and these kind of projects will become, for example, great companies. So in this view, I think maybe overheating is also necessary. Therefore, my opinion is that I think the market is overheated, but perhaps this is an essential phase we have to go through. And Mr. Zhang, you are a master investor, so do you agree with his opinion? Now, I think the startup economy in China is definitely powerful in the future. I also agree with Miss Jenny. Maybe 1 or 2 years later, it will become even more powerful. It depends on several factors. First, now it is quite like the situation in 1998 or 1999 when the new technologies were replacing old technologies and creating new business models. And so emerging technologies are gradually coming into people's daily life. So I think it is quite similar to the situation in 1998 or 1999. But back then, because we didn't have so much capital, we were in scarcity of capital then. I still remember that in 2001 we had a meeting. The conference room was only 1/5 of the size of this conference room. But now, for us to have a meeting, we will see a very crowded and fully filled conference room. So, in the process of replacing existing technologies with new technologies, there will be a lot of investments. Of course, there will be overheating in the market. And secondly, for example, we have 1.4 billion Chinese populations, and 1 billion of them are thinking about how to make money. They think about how to make the life of their family, of their parents better. So in the whole world, 800 to 900 million people are thinking about how to make more money. I think this is something that can only happen in China. So now, with so many people who want to be rich, and this will create a large market. And in this market, you can't just buy a bottle of water or something else. We have to, we need these people to cooperate together to develop this huge market. And I think some of the new technology can already be digested in this huge market. And thirdly, we do have some overheating, and there will be overheating. Like we have the most unicorn enterprises in the world. Like Friedman said, inflation itself is a monetary phenomena. It is also true to unicorn. Unicorn itself is also a monetary phenomena. But here I'd like to mention that we just had a survey or research. Usually, in the first round of financing, it is different from the past. In the past, we only had the A round, but now we have the seed round, we have angel investment, we have A round, A plus round, or A plus plus round. We created a lot of new words. Let's assume that we only have the first and the second round of financing. Now, the price level is about 15% higher than that of 2000. And Jenny worked in C-Trip, and we invested 300,000 in C-Trip in the first round. And a few months later, the C-Trip got another 1 million investment US dollar investment. So I think the price level only goes up by about 15%, unless you are really great, like Yu Kai or some other fella, and this fella has nothing, and his company just is worth like 500 million US dollar. And for Huada, its price is even higher, and he wants to create something philosophical, and nobody understands what he wants to do. But anyway, overall speaking, I think for A round, the price level is about the same as we had in the past. So in this view, first we have the capital, and secondly, China is a huge market. And thirdly, indeed, we are in a process of technology-driven changes. So in this process, we say the startup economy is powerful. Does it make any sense? Of course, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So Mr. Zhang and Jenny mentioned that BAT now are deemed as traditional companies. Perhaps 10 years ago, we never used the word powerful to describe the innovation market of China. So globally, people believe that China has the population, has the market, but nobody say that this market is powerful. And now we have companies like Touchpal specialized on the overseas market and Horizon Robotics. In the future, I know you will focus also on the overseas market. Yes, we do have businesses in the overseas market. So compared with 10 years ago, the market is different. The situation is different. On one hand, we have capital. On the other hand, in recent 2 to 3 years, we have truly become powerful. So, in your opinion, what are the other factors that have been driving the rapid development of Chinese market in addition to capital? For example, government maybe, or maybe other factors. What are the other causing factors of the rapid development of the startup economy in China? So I think I'd like to share with you from a micro view because we focus on the mobile internet. When we look at the global and Chinese mobile internet markets, we find that the Chinese mobile internet market is truly the number one in the world, even better than the US. And I believe this could be partially because of the popularity or the prevailing of the mobile payment. And in some emerging markets, for example, the Southeast market, we can create some business model there, but we found that mobile payment was not a mature business model there. So to some extent, I think the popularity of mobile payments like Alipay and WeChat payment enables us to grab a large market share. And this also catalyzes the development of a new retailing, help us to implement the new applications in the market. Well, I think I do agree with Mr. Zhang in Horizon Robotics. At the end of last year, we launched the first generation chip. Back then, we just finished the A+ round financing. And 3 years after the establishment of the company, I think. So back to the question. So what is the driving force behind a powerful economy? Of course, we need capital. And in our company, I am also in charge of human resource. So from this perspective, I also have my own observations. I think the backup of talents, be it the number or the capability of talents, is also a driving force for an economy, especially the technology-driven startup economy. I do feel that I worked in the Silicon Valley for about 5 years. I think macro data can also represent something. For example, I think it was at the beginning of last year, People's Daily published a very long editorial entitled Going Back to China. It said that in the past 4 years, technology talents coming back from the overseas market to China accounted for 2.6 million. And in recent years, the number continues to pile up. Last year, it was about 400 to 500,000. I went back to the Silicon Valley recently, and I felt that when I went out, it was not like in China where you only have to bring your mobile phone, but in the Silicon Valley, you still have to bring your wallet and your credit card. And also, I know around me, 1 out of 5 overseas students will come back to China. And, and therefore, I think talent is also a driving force for the growth of startup economy. Therefore, I think now China has seen a lot of technology-driven startup. It is also true to Horizon Robotics. Our founder is the founding president of Baidu Academy, Mr. Yu Hai. He came back to China, and I think he is a typical example of the returning of overseas students, and also for the domestic market. The education of technology talents has also been improved a lot. So in terms of the level of technology talents, I think the gap between China and the Silicon Valley is being narrowed down. So this is what I observed in the market, and I believe this can also become one of the driving force, the talent.
With capital, with talent, with infrastructure, then it will work. And Mr. Zhang, you've actually looked at many similar companies. In the past, we used to compare ourselves with Silicon Valley, and now we're using powerful to describe the Chinese startup economy. But now, if you compare again the Chinese startup economy with that of America or Europe, are we narrowing the gap, or are we already ahead of the Silicon Valley? Well, lots of applications are now done in China better than in the US, but there are things that lead the general trend, and they are still the trendsetter in the Silicon Valley, especially new technologies that come fresh out of the basic research. Silicon Valley is really strong, but China is narrowing its gap. Apart from new materials, for example, we are tagging along very closely, like Horizon and many other companies. They are really close to America, though in terms of new materials, our capabilities are like 20 or 30 years behind America. So for new technologies, most of them, we are coming very close to America. Or for some technology soft applications, we are sometimes even ahead of America. But for the tech-heavy researchers or research-converted technologies, we are not as good as America. We need capital to boost up this process. And in the past, we didn't have the money on that, and it was impossible to find the money to develop the chips, and you had to rely on the government funding. But now there are lots of entrepreneurs in China who, apart from their own businesses, has a lot of money that they sit on, and they don't want to sit on those cash idly, so they put those cash into new projects, into the projects of new technologies. It's just been the late 5 and 6 years that this has started to appear. But in years before that, we didn't have the capital accumulation. Now we have them. And going forward, maybe some basic research would also be invested by the entrepreneurs sitting on idle cash. It takes time for us to go from a poor country or agriculture-based country to be rich. It takes time, and it will need capital to do things like enriching our economy. And if we've looked at the past 20 years, then you will find many examples of transforming ourselves using money to transform and enrich ourselves. ZTE is a good example People still think that the chips are still something that America can strangle us on. It's because of the basic technologies that are still huge gaps and far cry away from America. Apart from this tech-heavy stuff, there are many other things like blockchain. In the early days of blockchain, like Theoforum and Bitcoin, they were not starting from China. But it takes time. We are learning and doing at the same time. Sometimes we do this without fraud, sometimes we become tricksters. But anyway, over time, we can use what we emulate to be the pioneer and spearhead in the area that we use to copy. It takes time. History has always repeated itself in this way. I used to be working at a company called Wantong or Vantone. For example, tonight I would carouse at Haikou, and next morning I would go to another city in another area in China to work there and to struggle there. And these two geographical areas often form stark contrasts with each other in terms of the levels of development. And I would also encourage my leaders to do the same, the business leaders, because they have to feel the gaps of developments. And their experience will speak to the fact that it takes time for a region to develop to the similar state of development as other regions. But it also speaks to the fact that over time, we will finally get there. Since we all concur that it is powerful, but if we narrow our lens to look at the specific industries, AI, blockchain, they're all the rage in the world, but it seems that these hot topics in China are also debated in China. And are we leading in the world in terms of these technologies? Well, Los Angeles has the biggest concentration of blockchain companies, but China ranks number 2 in this regard. But it's hard to put it into practice in China because it reflects anarchy. It reflects the trend and the wave of anarchy sweeping across the world, because in the world, it is the anarchy, it is the increasing trend of anarchy that's affecting people's way of managing their own lives. So that's why it's hard to do it in China. What's more, there is no standard to putting things to the book, to keep the book. There is no bookkeeping system. Jenny used to be a CFO, and Jenny can't keep the virtual currencies on the book. It's really difficult. And sometimes if I invest in your company using blockchain and using the central distributed ledger, you will not know if I make money or not. I don't know if there is an accountant or accountancy firm that can create a way or an accounting standard to do the bookkeeping in the areas of talking. Talking is not just speculating coins. Talking is about, or token is about making efforts and you get rewards. It's just like the capitalist economy. It is only the communist economy that you can get things for free, but token is the very good representation of the capitalist economy. Companies can only retain 20% of the token that they get, and 80% more should be given for those who make efforts. You mentioned that you invested in cars, AI, and many other things that are at the forefront of the world. of the trends? Why is it that there is a legion of companies that are doing so well in China in these technologies? Well, Mr. Zhang is someone that I admire a lot, so I am a bit dizzy after listening to him. But anyway, how should we perform better in terms of AI, especially compared with Silicon Valley? We're not as young as many of you here. We've witnessed firsthand how the Chinese copycats emulated the technologies in America. But not just as a professional, but also as an investor, we are proud and we are more confident than before that we can do as good as America. For example, I used to talk to the president of Tsinghua University that in terms of the number of theses on AI, 40% are written by Chinese. So yes, America is stronger in terms of basic research than China, but the Chinese scholars are catching up. And secondly, the application of artificial intelligence in China has our natural advantages because it's about deep learning, and deep learning cannot be achieved without big data. China has a population of over 1 billion people. It's not just huge, it comes with different varieties, and it has a great diversity of data coming from these varieties. It's not just me, but the consensus of many that China can exceed America in many areas in the application of AI, and we've seen it happening right now. I've visited lots of AI conferences. People are saying that yes, America is strong in chips, but Alibaba, Tencent, iFlyTech, and many other companies are talking about their investment in smart home. But the key is to put things on the cloud, and second is to make sure that every device can be intelligent, and number three is chip in the era of ubiquitous interconnectivity. Every device needs a chip. So with those three keywords, cloud, devices, and chips, the big companies that I've mentioned are integrating these keywords and doing it in a better job than America, though chips may be in the hands of American companies. And we invest in car makers. And when we invest, we look at the mega trends of autonomous driving. And autonomous driving should be based on batteries. Well, the biggest industry in China is real property, and the second, real estate property, and the second is vehicles. Yes, indeed. We invest in the consumption areas, and mobility is a very important part of the consumption sector in China. And we also look at medical services and medicine. It has a great amount of data, a great amount of structured data that can help AI applications materialize in China. So I don't think that China will do it worse than America. And there will be two giants in the world, China and America, going forward hand in hand in parallel. Because I have to come off the stage ahead of the schedule, so I have to talk a bit more. Years ago, we didn't have the infrastructure to make IoT happen, but now we can do it. Do you know how many addresses 5G involves? It involves 100 billion addresses. We have 7 billion people in the world. If we take that everyone has two phones or two phone numbers, you find it natural. And you may think that someone is an oddball holding 3 or even 4 phones at hand. So 14 billion addresses are for human beings. Then the rest of the addresses are for devices. So the devices are generating data 24/7, real time, at great amounts. And in terms of genomes, the full sequential genomic detection can generate several gigabytes of data. And if we have these data coming from everybody, then the number is staggering. We know that when the second gen genomic detection is less costly than before, the Moore's law in genetics is becoming more invalid in a faster way than the Moore's law in chip design. In the past, it took 3 billion to detect the genomic sequence of a human being, but now it will only cost you 20,000 RMB if you look for an agency in China.
So as time goes on, technology will become more and more affordable. But one thing we have to mention that we studied the pricing level of the US in the past 4 decades, and only two things that is higher than the price of inflation. That is education and another thing. Therefore, I think the future direction is very important. So thank you. So Mr. Zhang has to fly to Hong Kong, so he has to leave earlier. I think we can continue the panel discussion. Now our two entrepreneurs are here. I believe are there any bad things you see? For example, in some areas we can catch up with the US, or maybe we are better than the Silicon Valley. But to make the startup economy more powerful, there are also things we need to improve. So I would like to ask our entrepreneurs here, if we want to become more powerful, what are the things we are missing in this ecosystem, or what are the things we need to improve in the ecosystem? For TouchPal, we focus on the overseas market. Therefore, we have an in-depth comparison between the domestic and the foreign mobile internet market. There is a huge difference. Of course, China has its own advantages, as mentioned before. However, we have to admit that in many areas, we are still lagging behind. For example, Jenny and Mr. Zhang both mentioned that for the fundamental technologies, all technologies that must invest a lot of time in these technologies, we are still lagging behind. For TouchPal, because we have input method and other applications, we spend a very long time in the overseas market. We are not we are not copycatting others. Other people are copycatting ours. And when we were awarded in the international competitions, or when we talk with other people, it seems that it seems that the number of Chinese companies or colleagues are few. In Barcelona, many foreign colleagues came to me and say that you don't seem to be like a Chinese company, but I'm not very happy after hearing this. Because for foreign people, they think Chinese company can only do the copycatting, and China has huge market. I talked with my Israeli friends. My Israeli company is quite sarcastic because he said if the Israeli market is as big as the Chinese market, my company will be worth or would have been worth for tens of billions US dollars. So for the foreign companies, when they look at the Chinese internet company, some of them are very jealous about the Chinese market, which boasts over 1.4 billion population. But I think the Chinese entrepreneurs are not patient enough and that they are not visionary enough. Usually, we look at the project in the short run. I can give you uh, an easy example. For example, many entrepreneurs talk about layout or strategy, but for the American entrepreneur, they talk about passion or interest. If you mention strategy or layout to the Chinese entrepreneurs, they think you are bullshitting. Rather, they focus on your passion, your interest. They want to know the things that you would like to invest time and effort into. So for Mark Zuckerberg, he started Facebook not because of his passion, because he wants to get hit on other girls. So I believe this is a major difference between between the U.S. and China. And another thing that makes China lag behind the U.S. is that even though we have strong applications, but globally in the overseas market, the global presence of the Chinese companies it's still not strong enough. But for Google and other companies in the Southeast Asian, in the global market, these companies are able to improve their legacies. Therefore, I think the Chinese BAT are still lagging behind. Once in the overseas market, it is difficult for them to get blended in. So for TouchPal, we are we feel quite lonely operating in the overseas market because we believe the legacy or the influence of the Chinese company it's still not big enough there. So we're hoping in the coming future, more and more Chinese company will look at the overseas market. So it's like you want to partner with other companies, but the number is too few. So I think Michael mentioned two things. Michael mentioned two things. Mr. Zhang also mentioned that innovation requires accumulation. Innovation is done through a series of accumulation. And he said that maybe the innovation and entrepreneurship at a fundamental level is fewer compared with the US market. At this time point, I think China is adapting to the major trend, and in the future, I believe TouchPal will start to seeing more and more Chinese partners in the global market. And for the horizon, we were established in 2015, and we focus on the fundamental technologies because we produce the AI chips, and we were one of the first companies focusing in these areas in China back in 2015 because we want to develop such a chip, a fundamental technology. In order to be prosperous, we will need fundamental technologies, and we need Chinese companies to shoulder this responsibility. And I believe this is a historic opportunity. We spent 2 years developing a chip, and Michael said that we need patience, and I do agree with him. So, for example, in terms of human resources, in our company, we always say that you have to withstand the loneliness. So as time goes on, I'm glad to see that more and more more and more capitals and fundings are coming to the fundamental technology. We mentioned there is a Israeli book, Startup Nation. So Israel is a country with only 8 million population. Its startup economy is outstanding in the world. Apart from the US, people all believe that Israel is a successful startup economy in the world. Author of Startup Nation is the advisor of Economy Bureau, and he said that compared with China, China now is also witnessing a lot of entrepreneurs who would like to invest in the fundamental technology and who have the global vision. Such entrepreneurs like Michael are appearing in the Chinese market. They all have a global vision. And for Horizon Robotics, we are preparing for the first overseas office. And last January, we 40% of our revenue came from our overseas business. For the chip level solution in four mainstream automotive market like Japan, Europe, the US, and China, we have clients in all these markets. Of course, we need to shoulder the responsibility and we need to look at the future. Maybe in some areas there is the overheating, but I think the development of startup economy is a process of developing through difficulties. So there is some overheating, but there are also some companies that can choose the correct future direction. And after that, we need to be patient and down to earth, and these kind of companies will be able to grow. So I'd like to ask Jenny two questions. We have two investors here. For their company, do you think their kind of companies, do you think there are many these kind of companies in China? And for investment to these companies, many people criticized that Chinese capital only look at the short term. So, in your opinion, will there be more capital of this kind? Well, first, I think the existence of our two panelists here means yes, and in the future there will be more and more of these kind of companies. So generation by generation, we will move towards better and higher level. From the perspective of consumption upgrading, when we are able to make sure the sustainers, and then we want to have better things. And also, if we look at the first generation entrepreneur, they mainly focused on survival. But the second generation or the second generation rich, they can do things according to their preferences or interests. They don't have to inherit the family business. Maybe he's interested in cooking and then he can focus on cooking. So many second generation rich can break the shackle of earning the bread, and they can pursue their own interests and dreams. So more and more young entrepreneurs and innovators would like to do things in order to realize their interest. And we are also talking about the craftsmanship, and we can see the craftsmanship in many young entrepreneurs, and this adapts to the development of the history. So in China, the investment, the startup, as well as the business environment are still at an infant stage. So at an infant stage, there will be problems. There will be people looking at short-term investment, people looking for quick money. However, I don't think they represent the mainstream. Historically, usually company with a long-term vision will be able to grow and create more value. and such high quality companies and investors will grow in number, and I believe this is the future direction. Of course, now the number is not that big, and the percentage might even be lower, but I think I am optimistic because we are seeing more and more companies of this kind. And sometimes the world is not just black and white. So, in terms of humanity, nobody wants to make quick money originally. Sometimes it's just that this is just their target at a certain phase. For example, I met some AI companies. They have great scientists, they have great engineers. They are not delving into a lot of build to learn or fundamental research. What they are doing is to combine their scenario with the AI technologies like 10 to 20 years ago. For example, the combination of technology with the home security scenario or other scenarios, they just want to commercialize and implement the technology. Maybe their dream is not that noble, but still they are solving a practical issue. I believe these kind of entrepreneurs and scientists should be respected. And after the first round of accumulation, for example,
I'll give you another example, a computer on computer vision. It uses old technologies on computer vision to enter the security and guard sector, and it made money that gave it with more energy and more money to conduct deeper investment and spend more time on renewed theories of computer vision, and that would in turn make them stronger. I am not optimistic. I always see the bright side. Another question. There are things that you haven't mentioned. People are saying that the Chinese capital are investing a lot and increasingly lots in outside of China. You invested in Grab taxi. And do you think that there will be more capital going overseas, investing in overseas companies? Well, people say that there are a couple of keywords in this industry that you urbanize. For example, Pinduoduo and Kuaishou are the representation of it. And the society is also getting older. The aging of the society is the second keyword. And internationalization is the third. Be it capital in China or companies in China, they are at the forefront of the world in many areas. Say lots of mobile applications, best represented by BAT, are expanding overseas. YY is doing the same thing with very good success. So we see that after gaining success in China, a lot of Chinese companies are able to take a further step overseas. When I take a team to India and Southeast Asia, we find that their local companies are emulating the Chinese companies, not American companies. That's my learning from the site visits. And that means that we are able to step over the threshold and go overseas. As so is the case for capital. We should not forget the big backdrop that China is the second largest economy in the world. And we are economically completely capable of distributing money in a global layout. So this is a trend that we should not buck, because capital and resources are all going overseas. I've invested in Southeast Asian companies, Australian companies, American companies, and Grab taxis as well. I am very lucky that I am one of the earliest to do that, though there are things to be desired. We had the confidence because we had the confidence we have the confidence that we can estimate the performance of the target company when I have the capability and experience in the target industry. But if I don't have the know-how, the insight in the target industry, I would not have do that. I would not have done that. So that's a tip for the modern investors that don't go into uncharted territories, because if you're an investor and you wade uncharted waters, then you may find lots of strange things in terms of law, in terms of investment policies, so on and so forth. Another tip is that do not take over the overheated, asset-heavy companies. We should buy time and invest in technologies, perhaps in their infancy, but we should, by investing in the new technologies, take up the high ground of future and make sure that you win in the future. Since we're running out of time, so 2 more questions for the startup representatives. The first question is, given 3 to 5 times, what sort of company in 3 to 5 years' time do you want it to be? What is your anticipation for your company? Jenny said she's an optimistic, but I agree with 2 words that she mentioned. One is rationally optimistic. Another word or another phrase is humbly confident. Horizon is on the way. We are in absolute terms a startup. We are on our way. We are in an uphill battle. 3 to 5 years going forward, we want to be an AI computing platform. We want to first embed our chips to the devices. That's for 3 to 5 years. But in 10 years, I wish, this is also my vision, that we can have our own footing in L3 and L4 autonomous driving. And the future autonomous cars in 10 years' time can be empowered by Horizon's chips. 28 million vis-a-vis 17 million cars in America. I hope that the 28 million cars in China can be powered by Chinese chips as well. I want to echo what Jenny said. Internationalization. It is in line with the strategy of my company. In China, apart from the 2B companies like Horizon, we can find ever-dwindling opportunities for the 2C business model, apart from maybe speculation or overheated investment in some targeted companies. But the 2C market is overall teeming with competition and competitors. So internationalization is really important to broaden your portfolio and broaden your horizon in Southeast Asia and even in Europe and America, where you find loads of opportunities. But seldom can you find any company that can seize these opportunities. Even the big companies like BAT may find it hard to make successful inroads there. And we saw some trends like UC and Liebao, who had their presence in India and many other countries. But the competition is still not in their favor. Many of them are just tools. TouchPow will globalize itself, but we will walk on a different path. First, we need to have our own competition barrier, technically or otherwise. And we're also having our product layouts in overseas countries. So our vision in the next 3 to 5 years is to become the truly global and internationalized internet firm. That's our vision. I wish that all the Chinese autonomous driving cars can be powered by Horizon's chips. All the input methods can have the PayPal technology, and there will be lots of companies like Baidu Capital that are supportive of companies with a vision. Thank you very much for participating in this panel talk.
Sad sparks begin.